But let's start with what is happening in the state of Israel. It's almost unprecedented, where the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu is pushing ahead to get rid of his critics and also his rivals in the establishment. Now, the Israeli cabinet, that is the Netanyahu cabinet, has approved the sacking of the domestic security chief, Ronen Bar. This despite the opposition from thousands of Israeli citizens and reservations that have been expressed by the Attorney General's office. However, what is interesting to note is that the sacking of Ronen Bar has been stayed by the Supreme Court of Israel. Now, the vote to sack him took place on Tuesday night, and for the very first time in Israel's history, the head of the Shin Bet has, of course, been sacked from his job. However, the implementation of this particular order is going to run into a serious legal roadblock. Now remember, relations between Ronen Bar and Netanyahu had deteriorated over the controversial judicial reforms months before the 7th of October attack. And that's not all. Shin Bet was also investigating into Netanyahu's aid for alleged breach of national security. Now, Ronen Bar had accepted responsibility for his agency's failure to avert the 7th of October attack. He had already announced plans to step down before his term ends in late 2026. Now, Ronen Bar was appointed to lead the Shin Bet in 2021 by the previous Prime Minister. But within hours of the sacking and the stay on Shin Bet's chief came the order, which has of course now become old news. The Attorney General is now the Israel's next Prime Minister's target. The government will convene on Sunday to vote on a no-confidence motion against Gali Baharav-Miara. Now, the government website says, and I quote here, "We resolve to express our lack of confidence in the government's legal advisor due to her inappropriate behavior and also due to significant and prolonged differences with the government." Now, Miara is known to be a vocal critic of Netanyahu, the chief legal advisor to Israeli government. Now, Miara has often criticized several positions taken by Netanyahu. Now, two of the biggest instances include the contentious judicial overhaul of 2023, in which the Attorney General opposed the move to neuter the Supreme Court's powers and warned of its danger to democracy. And that's not all. Miara has also opposed a plea deal in Netanyahu's corruption trial unless it involves a public admission of guilt. The Israeli people have, of course, reacted pretty strongly to the Netanyahu-led government's unilateral course of action. Many are calling it the death of democracy in Israel. Now, in the past few days, thousands have in fact taken to the streets accusing Netanyahu of putting his political career before Israel's overall interests.
I am looking at the end of the way of Israel as we knew it in the past. We are very concerned that these are the last days of Israel as a democracy. We are here to try and change this course, but the chances are not very high.
Now, ever since the 7th of October, many department heads have acknowledged their responsibility since the attack and after that as well during the course of the Gaza war. Now, several individuals from the military have in fact stepped down while others have been sacked, particularly the former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu is the topmost leader who is yet to bear any responsibility for the worst attack in Israeli history, one that happened under his watch. All right, now to give us more perspective in terms of what is happening at this moment in the state of Israel, we're joined by Mr. Daniel Levy, who's the president of the U.S. Middle East Project and also the former senior advisor to the Israeli Prime Minister's office. He's joining us live from London over the phone line. Ms. Levy, the fact that Netanyahu seems to be at odds with so many of the people that are a part of the Israeli government setup, it is the Attorney General that Netanyahu is now going after. Why is he doing this?
Well, I think it's precisely because he wants to change and complete, I think one would say, a revolution. I think that's the correct word, a revolution amongst the elite establishment, office holders and institutions inside Israel. The Prime Minister has for a long time had in his crosshairs, has targeted the judiciary, the heads of the security establishment, what we call the gatekeepers of democracy. Let me add a couple of caveats because they're important here. First of all, Israeli democracy has been not a democracy for the Palestinians who live under Israeli occupation. In a way, we have here one state that's partly a democracy for Israeli Jews and an apartheid system, as it has been called by the International Court of Justice, for Palestinian Arabs. The other thing we have to note here is the timing, that this dramatic move, which is a constitutional crisis in a country that doesn't have a constitution, came just after the resumption of the Israeli fighting in Gaza. The Israelis have chosen to collapse the ceasefire. And these things do go together. And what Mr. Netanyahu has said, and he's posted on social media, is that, and these are the words he used, like Mr. Trump, I am conducting a fight against what he calls the deep state.
Interesting. So he mentions the deep state. But the fact that, before the sacking of Ronen Bar, there was this controversy that just blew up across Israel. And this is where Netanyahu, it was being reported, he came out and said that he is effectively being blackmailed by the head of the Shin Bet, the sitting head of the Shin Bet at the time, Ronen Bar, and also his predecessor. It's almost bizarre that the head of the domestic intelligence agency and his predecessor should be blackmailing the sitting prime minister. Why is it that the Israeli prime minister feels that his own security intelligence committee's head should be blackmailing him?
So, if I may, just a little context here. First of all, the Israeli prime minister is in court. In fact, had he not have succeeded in postponing the hearing, he would be in court most days of most weeks, facing personal corruption charges. These are more than allegations. These are charges that have been pressed and that are now going forward with court hearings that have been conducted over the last more than a year. So number one, Netanyahu needs this. He needs this for his own, very literal, get out of jail card. At the moment, the gatekeepers are not allowing this court case to be put to bed as Netanyahu would like. Secondly, he needs a strong coalition in his government. He got that coalition strengthened by resuming the war in Gaza. But there's another element here, as is often the case when a society is so polarized, which is on the other side. You did have not the current gentleman who is head of the Shin Bet, who Netanyahu is seeking to fire, Mr. Bar, who you've been talking about, but a former head of the Shin Bet. Just a few days ago, Mr. Argaman came out, I would suggest very unwisely, in the Israeli media and said, as the head of the Shin Bet, I know things about Netanyahu. If you violate the law, Mr. Netanyahu, I will go public with them. Right. Now, this, I would argue, is something that can never be done, but it is not something that Mr. Bar has tried to do. And so the sense at the moment is that there is a struggle over, from the perspective of Netanyahu and his supporters, the Shin Bet are using their power to bring down a legitimately elected government. From the perspective of the opponents of Netanyahu, right, he is trying to seize control of the judicial and the internal security system to use it against his political opponents. All the while, Israel at war, Israel conducting this genocide against Palestinians with a very deeply polarized society.
All right, we'll have to leave there. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Daniel Levy, for joining us with that perspective there.
Thank you.
For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.